My name's Robert Hawkins, and I live in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm now a new author. I've also been a professional musician and an educator in a public school with special needs kids. I'm originally from this area of Ohio. I'm sitting right now in West Union, Ohio, in the same county where my book takes place. And this book is called A Book of Matches. And this was just released on November 7th. And first of all, I want to thank everybody for your support. Unbelievably, it sold out on the Jesse Stewart Foundation the first day it came out. I also have a lot of friends on social media and friends that I work with in Nashville. I'm overwhelmed with the support that we have and continue to get for this endeavor, which took about 7 years. This is a very personal story to me, and I've been inspired to write it over my whole life. I knew it was a great story to begin with, and I felt like it needed to be told. To be honest with you, I wasn't even told the truth early on in my life because of how shocking the murder was of my grandfather in 1949. My family, felt like it would be best told when I was a little older and a little bit more mature. And I have to agree with them. It's a lot to take in. This event left my mother without a father at 9 months old, and her sister and my aunt 3.5 years old. So it's something that's kind of reverberated through our whole family and has affected all of us. Things that sometimes happen before you're even born have a great impact on you. So I've also enjoyed having folks tell me about how they feel about the book and my approach to it. And it just seems like it's all come together in a very serendipitous way. For example, my grandparents were actually married in Ashland, Kentucky. And I called the Jesse Stewart Foundation one day because it was the only author that I knew. And he encouraged me to call the Jesse Stewart Foundation. His name is John R. Simon, and he wrote a very cool book about Cowboy Copas, who's another famous person from our area here in Appalachia. And he encouraged me to call the Jesse Stewart Foundation, and that very day they told me that we were going to publish a book. So all that work that I'd done over those 7 years really started to come to fruition. And my family and I leaned on them heavily to write this book because I did extensive interviews with them and got their insights and how they felt about this. And also the local people here in both the Peoples area and West Union area of Adams County, Ohio, they were very, forthcoming and wanted to share their memories and how it impacted the communities that were involved. And when I say I did extensive research over those 5 years, I garnered so many articles that the binder was actually about this thick, and that was just the stuff from the internet. I also was able to go to the courthouse here locally where both the state Supreme Court trials were held, and was able to get court documentation. I have the autopsy that was sent to my grandma after this happened, and so much more. I mean, I even have their marriage license and censuses and textbooks from when my grandfather graduated from high school in 1937, letters from the war that he wrote to her. And my grandmother, she was a very cool person, even though she grew up in the sticks. Right after she graduated from high school, she got on a train and traveled all the way to Los Angeles, California, worked at Hollywood at a gas station because all the men were overseas, fighting World War II. And it's just been a really cool thing to see how this book has came together and how, something that came from nothing. I mean, I literally was looking at documentation that was over 70 years old and compiling all this information and getting corroborating articles from newspapers and interviews and letters and putting it all together, and then threading in Ohio history and local history and regional history and American history, and even world history, because all of those things were affecting the characters in the book. And it's funny to even call them characters because this is a true story. It's nonfiction, and this really happened. This is my book, The Book of Matches. I just want to talk about how I came up with the title. On the night that this happened in 1949, it was a Monday night in between Thanksgiving and Christmas. And my grandparents had had a party at their house. He was an assistant Sunday school teacher. They had this church gathering and party, and folks had came to the door and needed help with their car. And my grandfather was in the automobile industry, and he decided that he was going to help them, but they would have to come back. So my great grandmother had answered the door, said, "You guys are going to have to come back after the party." So it was pretty late at night, like 10:30, and they knocked on the door again. And when they came, he had changed clothes and went out with them and took the only flashlight that the family owned. Now, through my research, I found out that it was a very dark, frigid, rainy, cold, overcast night. Couldn't see the stars, couldn't see the moon. So it was extremely dark, and there was a little bit of rain. So when he went out, his senses would have been dulled, and from his time in the Army, I'm sorry, not the Army, but the Army Corps, wasn't even the Air Force yet, he had lost a lot of hearing because his job was to teach people how to fire their weapon, clean their weapon, and how to take care of it so that it would take care of them in battle. So he takes the only flashlight out of the house. She had a 9-month-old and a 3.5-year-old in the house with her, waiting for him to come back in. After about a half an hour, she got really nervous, put both the babies in the crib, and decided to go out looking for him on their property. The shop on his property is about 200 yards away, so she had quite a bit of a space to cover. And she, after she put the babies in the crib, she took out a book of matches, and she was striking those matches, trying to search for him on their property. And as my grandmother said it, that she struck that last match, and she had came around a corner where a truck was, and when she struck that last match, she was ready to take one more step, and she almost stepped on him. So the reason I called the book A Book of Matches is because that's how she found my grandfather, brutally beaten, and he had never regained consciousness. I also want to talk about that there's a metaphor built into the title for the Book of Matches, and it's just this simple suggestion that the world is a book of matches, and we as people are the matchsticks, and that our decisions strike those matches and cause fires. Sometimes, even when we don't make choices, those matches are struck, and it affects everyone, and everyone's choices affect each other. And that's why when I said earlier that something that happens even before you're born can gratefully impact your life and your family's life, because there's a void that has never been filled and will never be filled. And I can honestly tell you, in my experience in writing this book, that I still feel the residue of pain and hurt that my grandmother felt many, many years ago that has never really gone away. So this project is a historical memoir. That's the actual genre of this nonfiction book called A Book of Matches. This is a very historical part of our history in this region, because the man that killed my grandfather actually was the first person in Adams County in the state of Ohio to get the electric chair. It was a new technology. Before this murder, over 300 men had been hung with a death sentence. Obviously, this had to go to the state Supreme Court, and his lawyer wouldn't even let it go to a trial with the jury. It was actually decided with 3 judges. So not only was it impactful at the time, but also later on in other litigation in the state, all of the court cases that were murder cases after this cited this case as a way that they actually came up with a new law on how they had to come to an agreement that someone would get the death penalty in the state of Ohio. So, not only did it impact our family, it impacted the whole community, and the community actually was divided. Obviously, there were folks that were just dead set that this was the most heinous thing that had ever happened. People didn't even lock their cars. They didn't lock their doors to their houses. And people started thinking differently after this and, really took this seriously. As a matter of fact, in many of the reports throughout Ohio in the papers, it cited that people were actually having people save their seats before the trial in the morning, and would actually have people sit in their seats when they went to lunch to save them so they didn't miss any of the court case. So as you can imagine, this changed the landscape forever in Adams County. And, it was something that could happen here. Ironically, in World War II, you had many of our sons here in the county fighting in all the corners of the globe in World War II. And I think one of the most compelling parts of this book is my grandfather survived World War II. Shoot, he had even lived through the Great Depression and then gets killed after he comes back from World War II. So, that was something that no one expected, and left my grandmother a widow with 2 children in 1949. So you can imagine the pain, anguish, and complete 360 turnaround that her life took on, the strike of a match that fast. So, a lot of things came out of this book that were just really hard for me to even write. This is my family. This is my mother, Susan, my Aunt Dottie, and my Aunt Joyce. And this was very quick that we got all this together on a very spontaneous morning to interview me and interview them about this book. We so wish that we could have had my Uncle Marty and my Aunt Linda here, and I guess they would have probably not fit on this couch with us. We'd have had to get a bigger couch, but I digress. So I just wanted to have the family that are actually the whole core of this book. They're at the heart of the story. My mom was 9 months old when this happened, and my aunt was 3.5. And then my grandmother remarried and had other children, Joyce, Marty, Linda, and Russell. So the second part of the book is about the aftermath of the murder and how it affected her the rest of her life and all of her children. So guys, how do you feel about this book? So Mom, how does it feel to hold this book in your hands after 70 years? This story happened 70 years ago. How does this feel to you?
Kind of like a miracle. I can't even express how I feel about it, because it is very personal to our family.
And Dottie, how do you feel? I mean, you're the kind of the leader of our family, the matriarch. Grandma has been gone for some time, and all of us have her traits, but obviously you are the one that always has us at your house for the holidays. And what's your insights? How do you feel about this? What's your take on it?
Well, I too thought it was a story that needed to be told. It has always fascinated me, and as a young person, younger girl, I just knew what had been told to me. I never really questioned what had been told to me, but I always knew there was a lot more to the story. And I did think that what happened on that night in November impacted all of our lives. Our lives took directions that probably never would have happened if that incident hadn't happened. So I too think it's a miracle. I know you had talked about doing this for a long time, and I was really happy that day you called me and said you were going to get started, and did I have anything that you could use for the book? And I did. I had a tote full of my mom's memorabilia, diaries, scrapbooks, picture albums, pictures, letters, all the things that I had that had been given to me, I had put in this box. And I really didn't even look at it that often. But I had all that information. And I was happy to just give it to you because I knew that you wanted to do it, and I was hoping that you actually would do it. And you also helped me clean out my drawers and closets because I knew I had things, but I didn't know exactly where they were. So that day you said you were going to start, I really went on a mission to find everything I could find. And I looked everywhere I thought I might have put things. So that I would have that to give you and you would have that information. Because unfortunately, a lot of people that were alive then and knew my parents are gone. So we couldn't really ask them any questions. We had to go a lot on just the documents and the written things we had and our memories.
And I will say that I have to agree with my mother and my aunt that it is kind of a miracle. And I got all the information right at the right time. When I started this book 5 years ago, my mom and I literally just sat down on a computer in Nashville, Tennessee, and started getting articles off the internet. That's how it all started. And you know, for a while I was even nervous. Well, maybe I don't have enough material. You know, this happened so long ago. And then really about 2 years ago, I go in to visit everyone for the holidays, and Dottie at the I think it was Thanksgiving, pulled out all this stuff, and then that just was able to flesh out the whole story of the book. And we have Joyce here today, and the cool thing about having Joyce here is that, you know, my grandmother then got married again, and when she got married, she had more children, and of course, she went ahead and brought Mom and my aunt along with her. And then they got to help raise all the other children. So, Joyce, how do you feel since, you know, you knew your mother as well as Dottie and Mom, and of course I got to know her. But what do you feel like now that we have this book and you're in this book, and even that whole half of the book is about you and Marty and Russell and Linda and living here in West Union? How does it make you feel to have your life story also told in a book?
Well, I'm just very happy that you took the initiative to write the book. I can remember talking to Mom and her trying to explain to us what had happened, but it really didn't sink into me. And Susan and Dottie would talk about it. They had bits and pieces that they told, but as far as hearing the whole story, I never got to hear the whole story. And then, like Dottie had said, that when you had said at first that you were going to write a book about our family, and each time you came in from Nashville, we would all gather and we would all sit and talk about different stories that happened. And with my brother and my sisters, we also sat down and discussed different articles, different things that happened in our lives once Mom remarried. And so this is a story that really needed to be told. And I'm so happy that you're the one that's telling it. Mom would be so proud of you.
Oh, well, thank you, because, you know, that's the biggest thing about me. You know, I'm the oldest of all the grandchildren, and I have just got this thing about me that I'm a pleaser, and I never want to let my family down. And, you know, I never knew my grandfather, and neither did my aunt and my mom. I mean, literally, Mom has no pictures with her father because they had put so many antibiotic drops in her eyes when she was a newborn. They were afraid that the flash would take her vision away from her. So, in a really wild way, I was able to meet my grandfather and answer a lot of questions about who I was as a person because, you know, I didn't get to experience life with that grandparent. But I will say that I do feel that we all have him in us all the time, and my grandmother as well, because although the first part of the book is about my grandfather's life mostly and meeting my grandmother, the second part of the book is that aftermath and how my grandmother unbelievably pulled herself up, pulled her children up, and carried on and really succeeded in life. She actually ended up working in the courthouse, in the clerk of courts, where the trials were tried. And when she had to go to the bathroom, every day had to walk through the courtroom where her husband's trials were, and had to bring her children that were still very young just to prove that she had them. So,
Yeah, Dottie told me when we would go visit Mom, she would say, "Now we sat right in these seats, Susan," because I didn't remember it at all.
and it's something that, my grandmother really never talked too much about because she got so upset about it because, it drastically changed her life. And, it's something that all of us know. It's like an unspoken thing. We just know that it happened. And, even in the book, we talk about some very universal themes, that are unsettling to a lot of folks. This is a tell-all. We are completely forthcoming with everything about, my grandmother's life and my grandfather's life and all of the tragedy that happened in my grandmother's life. She had to overcome a lot. And I'm so proud too, guys, that, even though they came out of the Great Depression, both of them graduated from high school. I mean, for Grandpa to do that and Grandma, to do that. And also that, she set the example for these guys. I mean, my Aunt Dot was the, head of nursing at Adams County Hospital. So my grandmother modeled all these great things for her. My mom has a job and is a career woman, and Joyce works. I mean, she's one of the hardest working people we all know. We don't know what drives her to do all this, but see, I think those traits came from our, family and came directly from them. So guys, I mean, now that the book's out, what do you think that Grandma and Grandpa would think about, what would Grandpa Stainer think? What would Grandma Edie think about all of this? I mean, do you think in a million years that they would have thought when they were living their life that somebody would write a book about them?
No, I don't think they would have thought that. I know my mom, though, was very into the times. She was always very present in the present. She liked movies. She liked music. She liked books.
She loved to dance.
She loved to dance.
Oh, man,
She loved all of those things. And I think that she would just be awestruck to know that she was a central character in a book and that people would be interested in her life and what she had done. But I've always thought that she was an exceptional person, that she was a person before her time. She was brave, she was courageous, she did things and took on things that a lot of people probably, especially from Appalachia, would not have done. But she always had courage, and she would try to do things. So I think she would just be really excited to know that she was a central character in a book. Mm-hmm. And that people would be interested in reading about her.
And I think, too, like even looking at the old pictures, I mean, you have to understand that, these things have kind of been in a tote for years. And, like, I've got to see pictures that I never even got to see before. And, their wedding picture. And then there were other candid shots with Grandma and Grandpa in there together. And I see all my sisters' faces in different shots of them. And then when folks that know me pick up the book, they look at the book and then they look at me, and then they look at the book and they look at me. I've even had people ask, "Is that you?" And I'm like, well, if that was me, I would be 101 years old right now. This was taken in 70 years ago, before 70 years ago. So I think that it's imperative that folks know too that these were simple people that did extraordinary things. And I think that that's something I'd like for the young people in this area to realize, is that, everybody has to come from somewhere, and you never want to forget, where you're from, but it's okay to move on and aspire to do whatever it is that you want to do. And, I never thought when I was sitting in high school that I would be a writer. And I understand why my teachers would want me to read these books and write reports. And now I look back and I think, well, they knew more than I did, because now I've been a songwriter and a performer and got to, perform my own songs in venues all over the country. And now I have a book, and I've written and I'm an author. I don't even know how to feel about it. It's a new feeling. It's a new anxiousness and excitedness that I've not been able to feel before. So let me just tell you that these guys, without them, this book would have never been, it would have never happened, because they really have been the catalyst. And it was something I threw myself headlong into. I mean, I was very passionate about this, and I'm so happy that I can now look at them, and we all have something that we can share with our friends and the world. And I think that's the way it should be. So I just want to thank them for agreeing to be here. But I just want everybody to know that I'm not giving the book away, but that it was imperative to me that everybody knew, just like my grandmother would want us to do, that there's a very positive twist in this book, and you have to read it to find out what that is. So I've been able to share some deep, dark secrets and details that are in the book, but I'm not going to give the whole book away, sorry. You really have to read this book and let it sink in. There's so much history in here that's threaded through it. I've written it in a very cinematic way so that the reader's drawn in and you're actually just transported to that time. That was my plan. So, where can you get this book? Well, I've done this in conjunction with the Jesse Stewart Foundation. They have it for sale at their physical store, on their Amazon store, and on their website. I've also been told that very soon they're going to feature it on their Facebook, which I'm very proud to announce. And you can also get it on robhawkins.com, and you can get it through PayPal. It will actually have the tax, the shipping and handling included. And you can also get on my new Facebook Robert Hawkins author page, and it is also linked to PayPal, and you can get it that way. I also plan on doing some signings here in the area. I've already been contacted by some libraries, so stay tuned for that. We'll have some announcements coming up about that. The cost of the book is $20. With shipping and handling, it's $23. And we'll be sending it to you in a nice, fluffy, fancy, bubble-wrapped container so it doesn't damage your book. And until next time, thank you so much for your attention. And my name is Robert Hawkins, the author of A Book of Matches, and would love for you to get your copy. Thank you so much.